Hi folks, so last week I posted a video on how to make a Moog Bass patch on my Mini Moog, and I totally forgot to include the section where I actually show you the sound. So I've got it, I'm going to put it after this. Now you can find out exactly how to make that patch and recreate it yourself if you wish. And while I've got you here, I just wanted to run a couple of things by you. First of all, thanks so much. I hit 50,000 subs and that's amazing. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now and click on the alert bell. And while we're on the subject of subscribers, I'm thinking of doing a members only part of this channel. The reason is a lot of people complain about adverts, but obviously there's got to be some revenue that comes from this, and it's just from adverts at the moment. So I'm considering doing less free content. You'd still get free content. Members would get more with obviously no adverts. I'm just thinking about it at the moment, so let me know what you think. Who would be interested in that? Who thinks, no, please don't do it? And I'm going to consider. Also, I'm thinking of changing the name to Matt Johnson's Key Space. So if you see a name change, it's still my channel. It's just, there's nothing really to do with Jamiroquai on this channel, so I'm thinking of changing the name. Anyway, let's get cracking with what you didn't see last week. Okay, so to start with, let's go to the right hand section of the keyboard. Turn the cutoff frequency all the way up, emphasis to 0, contour all the way up to 10. So we've got a very open sound to start out with. These don't matter too much at the moment because you're just going to hear the filter totally open. Attack time on the loudness contour should be fast attack. Decay all the way this to the right. And sustain, I've got about 3 at the moment. Also on the left hand side of the keyboard, you should have the decay button off, otherwise you're going to get a sustained tone. Okay, so for this sound, I'm just going to use 2 oscillators. Normally I would use oscillator 1 and 2, and I'd leave 3 down and put it on low so that I could use it as an LFO. But unfortunately, oscillator 1 has decided it doesn't want to work today, typically. So I'm going to leave that out of the equation. I'm going to use oscillators 2 and 3. I find that 2 oscillators is generally enough for a bass sound. If you use 3, it's okay if you have a different octave on one of the oscillators, because that can be handy to help the bass pop out in the mix on small speakers. But by and large, you know, it's very tempting when you've got a 3 oscillator synth to have all 3 oscillators together on the same sound, you know, the same range, and you're just going to end up with this very thick sound that's, you know, not always that cool. So I find you can use even just 1 oscillator can sound great. 2 oscillators is generally enough. So anyway, let's start with oscillator number 2. I'm going to switch it on the mixer, and I've got the volume up all the way up, because on the Mini Moog I find that it's great if you really crank the mixer section into the filter. It just has a great sort of grunt to it when you crank it up. Different synths have different gain structures, but that's one of the good features about this one, in my opinion. I've got the octave down to 32 feet over here. This is referring to the size of a pipe organ back in the day, by the way, 32, 16, 18, 4, 2. So 32 is low, the lowest here before you go into low frequency. And I'm going to select a pulse width. I'm going to use this one here for 2. So that sounds like this. You can hear there's quite a decent bit of low end there. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to oscillator 3, and I'm going to keep it on the same range, 32. And I'm going to choose one of the different pulse widths. You can flick between these 2, actually. They're both pretty cool. I find the pulses give you the best bottom end for these kind of bass sounds. I usually have them both on this. So I'm going to select this one now. And again, the volume's all the way up. Got a bit of girth there. Let's keep it nice and in tune with itself as much as possible. Obviously, that's down to taste again. You know, you might choose to detune it a bit more, but as I said, I find it's quite cool not to do that. Okay, so let's go back to the filter section now. And you can see I've got filter modulation on, although unfortunately I can't use the LFO at the moment, but normally I'd have that so that I could put in some wobble. Keyboard controllers on 1 and off on 2. And now we want to shape our sound. At the moment, the filter's totally open. Set the attack time on the filter here very fast, maximum. Decay to about 600 and the sustain to about 3. And now let's take the cutoff frequency right down, and then we can hear what shape we've got here. So you can hear there it starts with a very punchy sound and it decays away and it ends up at this value here. So if you want it to be a bit more open at the end, you can just alter it a bit like this. You can choose where you want it to end up at, but I'm choosing 3. Still present there, but it's got some nice low end. And then on a Moog, what happens if you play legato from note to note, you won't get the punch on the next note, so it'll sound like this. And now that can be quite a cool feature. Okay, so let's give this punchy first transient a bit more of a nose, and that's where the filter emphasis comes in. I'm going to turn that up to 6. Again, it's one of these things now, you just fine tune between these 3 here. The cutoff frequency, emphasis, and the amount of contour, depending on how much nose you want it. This is where you personalize it. So you can hear, you can get lots of different bass sounds just by altering those settings a little bit. If you have the contour low, you're just getting more of a low end sound. You can put the portamento in, you get this sort of sound. I think with the filter emphasis, it is quite tempting to go too far with that sometimes. It's a payoff, because if you get too much of that resonance, what happens is that the note gets a bit thinner. So you're losing. I often hear people playing sort of funk type sounds and it just ends up sounding a bit farty, you know, because it's just loads of that resonance and no meat to the sound. So it's finding the combination between getting that cool squelchiness that you want and still retaining bottom end. Obviously you can EQ that afterwards. I usually will add a little bit of low end at the end, just to really bulk out the bottom, although the Mini Moog has tons of low end on it. Now, as I said, you can make it just one oscillator. It'll still sound really good, like this. Just depends on what you're going for, but I'm reasonably happy with that. Now what you've got to do is play it in your track and just tweak it until it suits the track. I'll also normally put the bass synth through a compressor like a Uri 1176, fairly slow attack and quite fast release, and then that's just accentuating the punch of that sound a bit more, and you know, obviously just controlling it so it sits in a track.